Yo guys, welcome back to another Danmachi Memoria Freese video. Okay, so I'm a little bit late with this video. I'll admit that, I'm like a week late. The plan was to do a tier list update video at the end of every month following the release of banners. Now, currently the current banners are up until the 28th of January, which means they would be included in the end of January's tier list update. So if you were expecting the New Year's units, they're not going to be in this video, unfortunately. But like I said, I am like a week late for the Christmas units, and I am sorry about that. Christmas and anime banner units, I should say. So I am sorry about that. On another note, no face cam. I am feeling kind of sick, and I'm probably going to take a couple of days just for myself to recover. I've had a headache for like 4 days. It's been driving me mad. It's mostly, it feels like a cold or a flu, but yeah, no, I'm so just gonna take it easy. No big brain gameplay videos today for the most part, and then there should be, I'm hoping there's a stream tomorrow, I'm not sure. Anyway, let's get into this video. We have 4 tier lists to update, and right now we're starting with the anime banner bell. How this is gonna work is I'm gonna review the character and then update the tier list right there on the screen. I'm sorry it's cut out most of it, like it's cut out the top half of his face, but you don't really need the artwork to understand. And I know it's sort of covered over onto, or spilled over onto his stats and stuff, but it is what it is. I'm going to be reading it out anyway, so let's get into it. He has an amazing strength stat and immediately a really good agility stat off the bat. That is the first thing I noticed. Besides the strength stat, my eyes always come down here to the agility stat, which tells me he's going to be based in war game just because of that agility stat. So let's go into the skills. His SA is an AoE ultra fire physical attack. Let's just skip everything else right and come down here for the physical resist, magic resist, and fire resist minus 50%. That is an amazing amount of utility combined in one skill. Now it is his SA obviously, and it does only last for 1 turn, which is kind of stupid. But then it is kind of, I don't want to say broken, but it is kind of broken. Skill 1, another AoE, high fire physical attack, ultra encounter rate, self actions +1, which is, that's just stupid. Stupid bad, not stupid good. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you know my vocabulary is very limited, and stupid can mean good or bad. Anyway, physical attack and fire resist minus 35%. Okay, so he lowers fire resistance by 35%. Now that's, while that's not the highest fire resistance debuff, it's also still higher than what I would call the baseline of what to expect. So if you say 30% is the baseline of what you should be expecting from your utility skills, whether they be buffs or debuffs, then 35 is a good level of utility based for a resistance debuff. Skill 2, another AoE, fast mid fire attack, higher penetration rate, and stats buffs and allies stats debuffs minus 2 turns. Okay, good utility, not the best utility in the world, but it's still good utility. I mean, you can tell that it's designed for, he is designed for war game, just straight, like from the agility and then the fact that all of his skills are AoE. The utility on his skill 2 is really good, but then it does depend who you're against. If you're against the light rush teams and stuff, then this is not really going to be that helpful, I don't think. I mean, it depends. I mean, it might be actually, I'm not sure. It depends which light rush which light war game variant team you're against, I suppose. Anyway, so skill 3, the super fire physical attack, temporary strength boost, ultra crit rate, and self MP heal by 30%. Beyond the ultra crit and the super modifier, the 30% MP heal, I don't see that being too useful, especially considering he's designed for war game. Let me just bring up my notes real quick so I can make sure I don't make a decision without going back and checking what I wrote in my notes. Okay, right, so we're going to decide right now. I'm going to basically everything I said here is in my notes anyway. There isn't much to do. He is a pretty plain unit. He has great utility on his SA. Unfortunately, he is fully AoE, which relegates him to only AoE content and war game, which means 7th zone when it's an AoE and war game, and that's it. Other than that, if you can SA sack him for Record Buster, maybe that would work, but that overcomplicates the strategies way too much. If you can pull that off, damn, well done. But that, like I said, is an overcomplicated strategy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back over here now, over to the tier list, and we're gonna put him where I think he belongs, and that is at the very top of the, well, not the very top, let's put you back there, bye-bye photo. At the very top of the C tier now. You feel free to disagree with me. Obviously, this is my opinion, based on a lot of statistics and stuff like that that I've written down. I don't share the notes or anything like that, by the way, so they are just for me. But the fact that he has no single target, his damage may be good, his agility is awesome, and he has great utility, but mostly in his SA. His skill 1 fire resistance debuff is not even the strongest fire resistance debuff, and if you're running him in a war game team, you're probably already going to run the physical Alice anyway, which makes his skill 1 pretty redundant, you know, in that sense. So C tier seems like a comfortable place for him to go, mainly because he just lacks too much playability in other areas. We are now going to move on to the next tier list update, and while I get that ready, let's just time skip. Okay, so we're over here. We're now got to update the Earth tier list to match the Drak Guard's Will Wine that came out with the anime banners as well. So let's just dive straight in because I don't want to make this video too long. Her strength stat, epic. All of her stats really good. Again, agility over 1000 instantly tells me she's designed for wargame, or at least, yeah, well, wargame at the very least. Her strength stat being over 2k is basically the standard right now. If you come across a unit that is a strength unit that has less than 2k strength and has been released in the last couple of months, chances are it's because they have some stupidly broken modifiers or percentage buffs or a niche mechanic involved. Anyway, let's look at her skills. Her SA Ultra Earth physical attack. Let's just skip all of this good stuff and come right down to the bottom, which was what I was using her for in Record Buster. I can't remember which Record Buster, but the single target and AoE damage increased by 50%. This is, as far as I know, the highest percentage buff to all types of damage that count. This technically counts as a debuff to the enemy, by the way, if you weren't aware. So increases all damage, and if I'm not mistaken, this is a multiplicative buff. So it is calculated after type and element percentage buffs and debuffs and all that good stuff. So 50% multiplicative damage or whatever to, yeah, multiplicative damage buff slash debuff to the enemy makes this amazing. And I was basically int sacking her in Record Buster. If you don't know what that means, is I was setting it up so that she would intentionally die after she got her SA off, so that my last unit could come in and take over, but the debuff would remain. So yeah, no revolving amulet or anything like that. Just let her die. Skill 1, allies fast strength for magic plus 40%, dex and agility plus 20%, and HP regen by 30% for 4 turns. Okay, now listen here. Most units that will self buff usually for around between 40 to 60% of their strength and or their element. So a 40% buff while on the lower end is to both strength and magic makes it a lot easier to combine a mixed damage type team. And because there is no element here, you can basically use this for a sack buff if you needed to. But then like I said, most units, this is on the lower end, so most units could probably buff their own strength and magic a little bit higher than this. Although the dex and agility buff, well, not so much the agility outside of wargame, but the dex buff is definitely welcome. The regen in wargame is definitely welcome. But moving on to skill 2 is an AoE skill, super modifier, single target and AoE damage plus 20%, crit and pen rate minus 40% for 2 turns. This is great. It's basically triple debuffs on the enemy here, providing you with more damage and more survivability in one go. This immediately puts her up there for what basically replace whatever sack unit you may or may not be using for your single target and AoE damage modifiers, because it adds that additional amount of survivability. So I will probably be using this Wine for a while instead of my Goblin Slayer that I use most of the time for my single target buffs if I'm using a sack unit for that. Skill 3, a third AoE. skill slow, low earth, ultra physical attack, ultra uncounter rate, sorry, stats debuff, and allies stats buff plus 2 turns. So great utility there, but it is slow. I mean, being slow means that she will always go last, which means she will always be able to extend debuffs and buffs no matter who is on the team, because she will always go last as it's a slow modifier. The problem being that she is now nothing but AoE, which means she's solely designed for wargame and AoE content, but leaning more towards wargame here. She does fit into AoE content like 7th zone, and her sackable skills or sack utility skills put her up there with basically, and I agree with my friend Tiv here, she's essentially the best sack unit in the game currently. The problem is, given that she does have great damage as AoE, but put her in a single target scenario without needing to sack her, she loses 20%. The 20% damage she would gain if she had a single target ability. If you didn't know, sorry, single target skills have a modifier of 20% more than AoE skills. So if you have a foe over a foes, so they're both super modifiers, the single target super modifier does 230% of the damage. 230% damage, whereas the AoE variant of a super modifier does 210, if I'm not mistaken. I may have those percentages either outdated or they may have changed, but that was the last time I checked. So being full AoE, if you could take her to a single target and still use these skills, and the utility would still be good, but single target units usually buff themselves a lot higher than 40% and include their element. But having this right here, man, it makes it really difficult. I really want to put her higher up, but she's so limited because of the AoE. It's really difficult. So unfortunately, right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over, I've read my notes, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put her where I think she belongs in this tier list, and she is going to go at the head of the C tier. Like I said, feel free to disagree with me, but it's just, I can't justify her being B tier when she lacks the ability to be used outside of single target content, beyond being a sack. I think, and I don't, the thing is, I could push her to B tier if I could say like most people could pull off the int sack tech, the int sack strategy in Record Buster, or outside of Record Buster or anything like that. So if you bring her in, let her use her SA, and then let her die off to keep the debuff that she provides, then yeah, I could put her in B tier. But as it's not an easy mechanic to pull off, especially for average, or sorry, newer players, or some harder off free-to-play players might struggle with doing it. So I just can't. The usability isn't there for most people beyond sack and beyond AoE, so unfortunately this is where she has to stay. Now we're going to jump over to the next element. Okay guys, so we're over here, we've moved on to the win tier list now, and we're starting off with the Raw Nord unit. Now I will say right now, his stats are great. His agility is exceptionally good, over 1100, you know, pushed over the halfway mark to 1200 as well. His dexterity, great. His strength, a little bit lower than the 2030 that we're used to seeing now from most units. I don't know why, you know, it just seems silly to drop him down to 2025, but his stats are overall good. His artwork's kind of meh, but we're not judging the tier list based on the artwork, thank God. So let's move into the skills. So his first skill here, right here, is the SA. AoE, ultra wind physical attack, great strength boost, ultra crit rate, allies wind attack damage plus 100% for 1 turn. That in itself is an amazing utility buff. But given the fact that he has over 1100 agility, we already know that he's going to be used and primarily for wargame. But having a 100% wind attack damage buff for your entire team outside of that, in single card, even in AoE content or single target content, would be great. Moving on to his skill 1, AoE super wind, strength boost, ultra encounter rate, self, free actions, low wind physical attack. So no utility to speak of here. 3 additional actions, super modifier on the attack as an AoE. Second, skill 2, AoE, fast high wind physical attack, ultra encounter rate, removes damage reduction, attack. Okay, so it removes damage reducing buffs that resist, AoE damage, and guard rate. So he is a stall killer, or supposed to be a stall killer, but I'm not seeing anything in the sense of damage. I mean, it is a fast modifier, which means it depends on how fast he is to when he goes after, if they've applied the buffs. And in skill 3, he does have a single target attack. Unfortunately, there is no percentage modifier on this. It is a high damaging ability, great strength boost, and ultra crit rate, but there is no percentage modifier on here, which kind of makes him lack a little bit. He seems he's a very bland unit. He is a stall killer, so he's not going to be really usable outside of Wargame for much. I mean, he's usable. Let me put it this way: he is usable, and based on his stats and his modifiers overall, he is going to be usable in AoE content and single target content. If you are lacking any specific wind unit, he will take that place. He will fit into a wind team, obviously being a wind unit, but the problem is he's very bland and he lacks so much, and even beyond his SA, lacks a lot of utility for the team in terms of damage output. Because if you take him outside of Wargame, removing AoE damage and guard rate buffs is not going to be as useful as you think. So not looking too great for his ranking right here, but we're going to move on to the next unit. Okay, so we're looking at the Tipsy Tabby Anarchy, and her stats, again, like this is what I'm talking about, the strength stat being 2030 being the standard currently, the agility much lower than the other units that we've seen thus far. However, let's jump into the skills and we'll see what's going on. So the SA, AoE, Ultra Wind, let's just skip all this, removes status debuff, removes status debuffs for allies. That's very niche utility to have there. There's no percentage modifier on that. It's not going to hit very hard at all. Skill 1, allies slow strength and wind attack damage plus 35% for 3 turns. While that is not the 35% is not immensely great, but buffing both strength and wind to her entire team, and in the same skill removing strength, magic, and agility buffs, yeah, that's a pretty useful skill in all content. There are some wind units that probably would benefit from that strength and wind buff. Skill 2, AoE super wind physical attack temporary. Skip all that. Let's look for the utility. Physical resist and wind resist minus 30%, dex plus 40 minus 40%. So she is one of the few units in the game that both buffs type and element and then debuffs type and element resistance. This overall gives her an immense amount of utility. Now, couple in the fact that she has a single target high, it might not be a super modifier, but she has a high modifier on there, as well as a percentage modifier for every strength buff skill, with an ultra crit modifier in there too. She's still going to hit decently hard in single target content, so she brings a buttload of utility, as well as the fact that she is usable outside of Warzone and AoE content. This bodes really well for her, considering she has extremely high, I was gonna say extremely high, she has very high stats in terms of looking at her damage output as well as her utility here. So we can come back to the tier list now, and I'm comfortable to put these guys in the tiers that I think they belong. Rawl, unfortunately, is coming over here to C tier because he just doesn't provide enough of anything to make me feel like he's anything special out there. And then the Anarchy right here is going to jump up to B tier. She provides so much utility, both buff and debuff, as well as being usable outside of AoE content, having good stats overall. The only downside to her is the fact that she doesn't do a lot of damage and doesn't provide that much utility with her SA, but I'm comfortable putting her in B tier. Right, now we're going to jump on to the last tier list of the video. I know this video is dragged on for a bit. I probably will put chapters on if you're looking for specific elements, but we're going to move on to the next piece. Okay, so we're over here, we're doing the water element tier list. Now this is the element that received the most amount of new units last month, so I'm going to try and get through it a little bit faster. Now magic damage dealers, or the magic damaging stat, will always be somewhat or a little bit lower than strength anyway, given how much damage they do and how the damage is calculated. So in saying that, this wealth, the anime banner wealth, has a great magic stat and an amazing agility stat, sitting over at over 1100. So we already know that he's designed for AoE content, maybe, you know, specifically Wargame, but we'll see how he measures up anyway. His SA immediately. Ultra water magic attack, great magic boost, high penetration rate, allies strength magic, physical resist, and magic resist all plus 50%. This, given how a lot of units now are self-buffing at least one, either their type or their element, to say between 50 and some of them even going as high as 90%, having someone to buff strength or magic on the side, if okay, well, I think this adds a lot of utility. I'm trying to word this correctly without overstepping. I think it adds a lot of utility. It's just, if you compare it to the units that you have in the water unit pool, it kind of lacks a little bit, given that most of them actually buff their own strength and magic anyway. So you would only be using this for the physical resist and magic resist buff for the most part, while it does provide an amazing amount of strength utility, sorry. If you are missing certain units, then yes, this comes incredibly useful in a lot of content. It just, to me, as someone who has a relatively well built water teams now, I wouldn't see a use for this SA. However, I do see that it is going to be useful for a large amount of people. Skill 1, self, physical resist, magic resist, water, and magic attack plus 50%. This in itself is amazing. Just being able to do this yourself. Now, while 50% is on the lower end, the fact that he is an AoE unit, 50% is relatively high for an AoE unit to buff itself. If you don't believe me, go and look. For the most part, it's mostly single target units that buff themselves beyond 50%. Usually AoE units do not buff themselves that high, and especially that high including, you know, resistance buffs as well. It's such a great skill to see, and in 3 additional actions, it's gonna really come in clutch. Skill 2, fast mid water magic attack, magic boost, allies physical resist, magic resist. Okay, so it removes resistance debuffs by 3 turns, or lowers the amount of turns that they have debuffs by 3 turns. Useful, but it's like reintroducing a stall meta after introducing stall counters. It's weird. I'm not sure where else you would use this outside of Wargame. I mean, there are some Record Busters where Record Buster probably, but I don't know how many turns the Record Buster debuffs last for. If it's 3 turns, then this is incredibly useful for Record Buster. Or I would say that if he wasn't a complete AoE unit, this is a problem right here. The fact that he is only AoE limits what content you can take him to. A high water magic attack, damage plus 30% for each self water magic attack buff, ultra and counter rate. This relegates him solely to AoE content, which is so sad. Okay, this actually does change my interpretation of where he should be ranked, but we'll move on to the next unit and then we'll come back. Okay, so we're looking at the Merry Maiden Philvis. Now, her magic stat somewhat higher than Welf's. Her agility stat is just a smidge lower. I'm sorry if you can hear my son in the background, he's very loud. He's reading a book. Anyway, right, so her stats are still great, but let's look at the skills now. SA, ultra water magic attack, temporary great magic boost, high penetration, magic resist, and water resist minus 50% for 1 turn. Now that in itself, if she has a single target skill, and I'm just gonna check, yes she does, but no percentage modifier, that's a bummer. She would go very well with a single target water team, or if you could int sack for her SA in Record Buster, this would make her exceptionally useful. Anyway, so skill 1, self magic agility and water attack damage plus 60%. See, this is what I'm talking about. 60% is so much higher than what I would expect from an AoE unit to buff herself, especially including magic like type and element. And oh, here we go, there's more dex and endurance debuff for 3 turns plus 3 additional actions. That is crazy. Skill 2, foes AoE, fast high water magic attack, ultra on guard, physical resist, magic resist, and water resist minus 30%. This is exceptionally crazy. Debuffing both types as well as element is stupid and is very rare in this game. This makes her one of the most valuable sack units for this element, or in my opinion, the most valuable sack unit for this element. I do believe I said that in the should you summon video that I made, or the unit review, I'm not sure, but this pushes her importance up, or her tier ranking up to a substantial amount. And then finally, her skill 3 is a single target high water magic attack, temporary great magic boost, ultra crit rate, but no percentage modifiers, which is a huge letdown. So she buffs herself and then has no way of actually doing incredible amounts of damage with her single target, but she is at least usable in single target, so there is that to it. We're going to move on to the final water unit and the final unit of this video. Okay, so we're here, we're looking at the Intoxicating Elf Ryu. I love this unit. This unit is basically my favorite unit that came out in December. In fact, she's one of my favorite units in the game for a lot of reasons, and not just how strong she is. Anyway, so let's look at these stats. The magic stat is so close to 2000, it's crazy. You know she's going to hit hard. Agility is very close to 1000, given that she's a single target unit. That's pretty mad. Her dex is extremely high. She's built for damage. You can see that straight off the bat. So her SA, ultra water magic attack, on guard rate, damage received, increases single target AoE damage by 25%. Now, given that most people are going to be dropping a 20%, that's only a 5% increase. Also, there's no percentage modifiers on there at all. So let me put it this way: owning her and using her, I can tell you she does absolutely 0 damage on this SA. Never use it. There's no point unless you really think that 5% is going to help you out. Skill 1, single target, fast mid water magic attack with high crit rate, self magic water. Magic and water attack damage plus 60%, and single target damage increased by 20%. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, she already applies a 20%. You would only be increasing that by 5%. A 5% damage increase is not worth if you have other damage dealers in the team. Skill 2, super magic attack, super water magic attack. Sorry, temporary magic boost, high on guard rate, strength and magic minus 45% for 2 turns. Now, while this has a super modifier, this does not hit as hard as her skill 3. However, it does hit considerably hard given her stats and her super modifier. So having to use this in turns where you need to debuff strength and magic, you don't lose out on too much damage, as it still does hit relatively hard, just not as hard as you would, not as hard as her skill 3. And speaking of which, let's move over to this skill 3, which is the bread and butter of this Ryu. Like, after the buffs and debuffs are set up, this is all you need to use, and if you can keep the MP management to a good level. So slow high water magic attack, damage plus 85% per each target's skill effect that increases damage received, attack type single target, and target skill effect that increases damage received, single target minus 1 turn after. Okay, so let me decipher that for you if you didn't understand what I was saying. So basically, you will do an increase in 85% damage for every single target damage increase modifier debuff on the enemy. So that, if you weren't sure, that is, I think that, wait, that's 170% overall. If you have an assist that does increase single target damage, as well as using Ryu's skill 1, would put 2 on there, so that increases it to 170% modifier for every one of them. But in return for using this skill, it removes one of the turns that the adventurer debuff is applied to. So if you've got 4 turns of single target debuff modifier on the enemy, after using this, it will be 3 turns, and then at the end of the turn it would go down to 2 turns. So essentially, without having a way to buff or increase or extend the amount of turns that it's on there for, like using Haruhime for example, you have to be very careful with how you use this skill. But it does hit stupidly hard, which is the reason they added a higher modifier to it and not a super modifier. If they added a super modifier to it, it would probably be hitting like stupid amounts. Like, it would be broken. They would have to do a balance patch on her, and I don't think that's even been the case for any unit that wasn't just like broken in terms of what they was like doing something they weren't supposed to do. But yeah, she's a crazy unit. She is relegated to single target damage, but she brings so much utility. And as you do know, or if you hadn't watched my previous tier lists, these tier lists do favor single target or damage over AoE in the first place. So even though she is single target, she does still rate very highly in my book. So let's come over and let's edit this tier list. and then we can end the video. I know it's been a long one, I'm sorry guys. So anyway, let's do this, shall we? I am thinking Wealth can come here in C tier. He's very well rounded, he's usable, he's good. It's just the fact that he relegated himself solely to AoE, and the utility he provides is easily replaced elsewhere by most units. The Philvis, I'm torn between B tier and C tier. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop her in B tier anyway, just because of how important of a sack unit she has become to the element. If you're missing a sack unit, or you're running a mix of physical and magic water units in a team, she has got your back. So in my opinion, that's enough to drop her in B tier. And then finally, my girl right here, there's no doubt about it, I don't care what anyone says, A tier all the way. She does so much damage. The only thing stopping her from being in S tier is the fact that she has a lack of utility, and her SA is basically wet noodles. But that is going to be the entire video, guys. You can find all of these tier lists from tomorrow, or the day after the video was posted, in my Discord, link in the description. Anyway guys, I'm gonna rest. I feel sick as hell, but if you did enjoy the video, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're not. Social media links in the description, and as always guys, I love you and I will catch you later.
Yeah, boy!